So in 2014, mid-March, I left Canada and I took a vacation and I went to Pakistan from Canada. I would spend about like a month in Pakistan with my family, with my friends, different places, and enjoyed myself, enjoyed my life over there in Pakistan. And when I got back, I think it was mid around like 13th or 14th of April of 2020, 2014. I got back to Toronto, Pearson, and naturally, it's not something that I wasn't expecting, but I did not expect the extent to what something like this would happen. I was at immigration. I was sent to secondary, and they said you just go through secondary. I said okay. Well, I was the only person who was sent to secondary at the time of immigration, which means when I was coming back. I was at that time I was what do you call a permanent resident of Canada. I had already applied for citizenship before I left Canada. That was in March of 2014. But it takes about 5 to 6 months around that time, sometimes even longer, to get a call for citizenship test and what other things you might have. Now this was in April of 2014. I came back. I was sent to secondary. There was just an officer, CBSA officer over there at the counter, and I asked her, "Well, I was sent here." She said, "Why were you sent here?" It doesn't say anything. There was like a big X, something like that, written on the card, on a card for me. And then the lady asked me that, "Well, did you get any arrests in the past few years or something like that?" I said, "Yeah, well, I got an absolute discharge, conditional discharge, which is right now an absolute discharge." She said, "Well, that's probably the reason they send people to secondary, but don't worry about it. You take the door and then you'll be sent to a secondary screening area." I said, "Okay." I went there, and as I went into the secondary screening area, there was somebody else from another flight over there, but there was just one officer checking that person. Naturally, I waited in line. I was actually sitting, and they called me, and then I went. I said, "Well, this is the card that I got to go to secondary." And then within like a matter of like a minute or two, about 5 or 6 CBSA officers started showing up. Amongst them, there was this old guy, fat-bellied guy, and he wasn't wearing a CBSA uniform, but he had like 5 or 6 badges, as if he was some kind of big kind of a guy. I think they said he was an intelligence officer, whatnot, investigative intelligence officer. I said, "Okay, cool." And then they took my cell phone, my laptop, everything that I had, they took out all my hard drives and whatnot. I said, "Well, I just brought in ghee. Maybe that's the thing." Ghee is like clarified butter that we have. A lot of people from Pakistan and India, we use that. It's like the purest form of fat that you can have out of milk. And they, 1 or 2 guys, they had a smirk on their faces. And this intelligence gathering person, whoever the heck, he was asking me what you were doing over there in Pakistan and things like those. I said, "Well, I went over there. I went with my family and went to meet my family with my friends and different places." And they started looking at some of the photos that I had on my laptop. And they saw some mountains. They said, "Well, this is not Punjab. You said you were in Punjab. This is the KPK province." And you know what he was looking at? He was looking at the Kalar Kahar. Kalar Kahar is a district. Usually when you travel from, let's say, Lahore to Islamabad, you go through that pass. I said, "Well, I'm in Pakistan. What does that matter?" And they said, "Well, no, this is the KPK province." I said, "What's wrong with it? Am I not allowed to go to KPK provinces?" The thing is, if you are an average person living in Pakistan, and if you're especially living somebody who's born and raised in Karachi, when you go up north, you don't know where the jurisdiction of Punjab ends and where the northern province or the KPK province starts. But that doesn't matter. And then they started looking at other photos. Amongst them, there was this photo of a tank that I had, a water tank photo that I had taken. I said, well, what is that? That's a photo of a water tank. I said, yeah. So what about it? I said, well, I'm just, they were building this water tank for the students of a religious seminary or a madrasa. And they just thought if I could contribute to it or ask people to contribute so they can have like a bigger tank. The reason why having a bigger water tank was necessary was because a lot of people were started showing up. They were, performing ablution, washing themselves. As Muslims, we usually wash ourselves, we cleanse ourselves before we go to pray. So there were like as many as like 1,000 people showing up sometimes. So we would run out of water. Those guys would run out of water. So they said that it would be helpful if somebody could help build a water tank, a bigger water tank. Obviously, I couldn't do that alone. So I asked, well, yeah, I'll ask my friends around, people around, if they could contribute to it when I get to Canada. That was the end of conversation. They also copied all the contacts from my cell phone, which we're going to get to later. And then they tell you cannot take ghee with you, as if that was the thing. They had like a smirk on his face of, well, you cannot take ghee with you. Everybody takes ghee with them, but they just made it a big deal out of it, as if this was the reason for stopping me. It wasn't. Then I had to pack everything myself, and then I kept telling the guy that you're not going to find anything in there. It's just my laptop, my games, and everything is there. They tried to make a big deal out of my trial for Microsoft Office expiring. And one of the officers asked that, and one of the officers, they tried to ask his senior officer that, should we ask him about this thing? He said, no, it's nothing. Imagine the kind of fishing that they were doing, that they had to, and they were trying to catch me at everything and anything that they could find. But they couldn't find anything at that time, so they let me through. So I packed up all my stuff, got out, and took a cab and got back to my apartment at Thorncliffe in Canada. So after that happened, the next day I had to go to the office and I got ready and whatnot. I think I arrived there was like a day or two left. And obviously when you get back to, after you come back after about a month-long vacation, you naturally check on your friends and, try to meet some friends and whatnot. And then I started hitting up some of my friends and in the meantime, I started noticing something. Cars were following me again. Not only did the cars start following me again, every time there was a police officer, a police car would see me, they would stop me and harass me for a few. Toronto police, I think it felt like the Toronto police had made like some kind of a hobby of harassing me. I did not care much about it. I thought, well, I've already applied for my citizenship. I'm going to be able to vote in a few months, and everything is good. I'm not breaking any laws. They kept stopping me. They kept harassing me. And sometimes, a lot of time when they saw me recording them, they would just let me go. But they tried to catch me on anything possible. Like, it was the most pathetic experience. And you would wonder that somebody who had firearms and he got careless with the storage of his firearms, that's it, 2 years ago. Why would that still be a big deal? But they were cooking something, as if they were trying to catch me on any or every reason. And they couldn't find that. At one time, I was visiting a friend of mine. At that time, he was a friend. His name was Michael Storms. And he's mentally very unstable person. And he got arrested several times as well. That's understandable. The person is not mentally well. I don't care. I was just going there to support him. I was just going to meet him. I kept in touch with him so that he wouldn't go out do something crazy. That's something a stupid person like me would do. That if somebody shows some signs that he might go and kill somebody or do something like that, I would take it upon myself to try to convince that person from doing something otherwise. At one time, he was in some part of in the northern parts of Toronto, and he was I think in Brampton or Mississauga area, and he was a security guard over there. I went over there and I asked him if he would like to have some coffee. He said, yeah, sure. So I went to the Tim Hortons nearby. As soon as I got out of Tim Hortons, I had like coffee in my hand. There was a police car parked right in the same plaza, in the same block. And I put the coffee in my car. I was driving a Lexus LS 400 at that time, and got out. And as soon as I made a left turn, the car pulled up behind me, and they kept slowly following me. And I kept looking. I was like, why are they following me? So I made a turn into one of the streets, and I stopped my car. And when I stopped my car, they turned on the lights. They came up to the door, to the window, to the driver's side, and the guy said, well, we stopped you because you were braking a lot. I said, I wasn't braking a lot at all. I stopped, and then you turned on the lights. And they kept me waiting in the car for about 40 to 45 minutes. I had hot coffee in my hands, and and sometimes they would check it, and they would ask for my driver's license. They would ask for my car documentation, and then even they would go as far as just try to match the VIN number on the car with the documentation, as if they could not find anything. And at the end, when they looked at the dashboard camera that I had, they said, what is that? I said, that is for my protection from you. And 2 or 3 minutes later, they let me go for no reason. I was to drive safely. So this is the kind of harassment I was facing in the following months after my arrival into Canada. Another person, his name was Kashif Majid. He was the one person I told you that he said he was being harassed by Qadianis or Ahmadis, whatever you want to call them. And then he said, I let him stay in my place. He was also working part-time security at a Toronto building. He said, you should come and meet me. I said, okay, I went to meet him. And he said that some people from CSIS came to visit him, and they asked about you, which means like about me. And the person's name was Leon Pella. From CSIS, agent's name was Leon Pella. He also gave me the number of the person. Unfortunately, I'll share the name details. And they asked him what kind of a person I was, and then all different kind of stories. Like every person that they could find connected to me, they would go to them, harass them. How they would harass them, they would try to say that, and they would tell them about me. Well, he broke the law. He's a danger to security. He's a dangerous person. Stay away from him. They said that. Even to there was a university student, his name was Arsalan, and they went to him, the RCMP went to him, they said, well, and he was studying to join the military in Canada, Canadian military. And they said, well, I would stay away from this person if I were you. He tried to break up my friends. They tried to break up my friends. They tried to harass me, my family members. Every time they could, they tried to isolate me as much as possible. Many of those friends, they came back to me and they said, well, this is what they said. I said, well, they're not going to do anything to you. Don't worry about it. They just threaten people like this. But this is what the RCMP and CSIS were doing at that time. Let alone the fact that every time they would get a chance, they would harass me. And they would stop me for several minutes for no reason. At one time, I borrowed a friend's motorcycle and I rode to my office at the RBC building. And as I was coming back, I started noticing there was this I think it was a Dodge truck. There was a big truck, Dodge 1500, Dodge Ram, following me. As I was taking left, wherever I was going, to a point where I parked. I will show you the location on Google Maps. To a point where I actually went and parked my motorcycle where my car was. And this truck went all the way in and returned. And I took off my motorcycle helmet and I looked at the truck. It was a bald guy with glasses on, just looking at me. And then he took off. He was following me. All of this was going on. This kept going on from April till October. And then in October, what happened was that there were two incidents that happened. I think they happened in, one happened in Montreal, one happened in Ottawa. And one guy shot, I think it was some Canadian National Guard, some kind of a Canadian guard, some guard. And then he ran into some of the one building, I think it was a Capitol building, whatever you want to call it. And Stephen Harper was in one of those rooms or something around that effect. But that guy was killed. Not something that you would want to do. But anyway, that's an act of terrorism. I understand that. It turned out this guy was a white converted Muslim. I think he was a white converted Muslim. This happened, I think, in October 18th or October 20th, something around that time. I will give you the exact date and the details of this thing. Okay? And then, I think the next day or the same night, some guy ran over some police officers in Montreal. And this guy, as soon as he got out, apparently he ran over those people and one of the guys died. And the police followed him for like 20 minutes. As soon as he got out, they shot him. And at that time, the narrative was a knife may have been involved. Now, all of these things were happening. And I usually don't talk about these things online that much. But at that time, everybody was starting, it felt like 9/11 was happening again. Because remember, if I told you that, you know, when there was 9/11, after 9/11, everybody, every person in America, wherever you want to call them, they would come and start cursing Muslims, cursing Islam, as if everybody, like the millions of us, are responsible for the actions of somebody, even though now we all know who did 9/11. Either way, this happened again, and I am, unfortunately, I'm an unapologetically Muslim, which basically means that, you know what, I'm not going to apologize on behalf of somebody else's activities. If I've done something, you come up to me, and then I'll talk about that. You know, I'll apologize. If I'm guilty, I'd apologize for that. But I'm not going to just say, oh, I'm really sorry for this thing. And the same thing happened. Before these incidents, you know, how could you come to a conclusion that, you know, that person who did that was representing Islam and whatnot? And even in the case of this person who ran over some people, as you have already seen in the, like, you know, 10 years later now, at the Christmas, I think, market in Germany, some Saudi guy who was an Islamophobe, an anti-Islam person, he ran over people. I think they were children that he ran over with his truck. And he was arrested. But you mean to tell me that this person who ran over a bunch of people I think in Canada, he got out, he went on a police chase. As soon as he got out of his vehicle, you shot him. Why would you shoot somebody? Because that person will not be able to present his point. Okay, I understand that, you know, you have a police shooter, but why would you shoot him right away? And then the words on top of it, a knife may have been involved. So that, you know, that's sufficient to raise fingers or raise eyebrows about the character of the police. And Ontario and Canadian police already has a lot of fingers pointed at them in the past. And every time they shoot somebody, apparently that person has a knife in their hands. I understand that somebody with a knife in their hands may be able to lunge at you, but there was no evidence of that. But there was an evidence of police shooting people, unarmed individuals in the past, and saying that that person had a 3-inch blade, 2-inch blade. This happened 15. They shot, I think, a person like 9 to 15 times in a Toronto streetcar. Anyway, I started protesting against it. I never actually admired or supported any of these things. But what happened was that people were saying that, you know, let's kick all these Muslims out of Canada. Let's kick all these immigrant Muslims out of Canada. That person was not even a Muslim, an immigrant. Apparently, that person was born and raised a Christian. He converted to Islam, and he was inspired by, let's say, ISIS or something like that. I did not care much about ISIS because I kind of had this feeling that ISIS never represented Islam. ISIS never actually, well, there were a lot of questions that ISIS was apparently manufactured. ISIS was not a natural progression of anything, any kind of resistance, as people are finding out even right now. Nowadays, that person, because there was an ISIS leader who kicked out Assad, so now all of it, he's the moderate jihadist. The first time you're finding out 10 years later. But at that time, that person, may have been a terrorist. So I said that I wrote a tweet. I will show you in a bunch of tweets. Harsh tweets, but they were not illegal. They were not some kind of radical tweets. I have my rights because I had already applied for citizenship. I remember that it's my right to have free speech. I can point out police corruption when I see it, or so I thought. I pointed out that apparently it seems like they shot him and placed a knife in their hands. And when they say all of these things, it really makes a person's blood boil, that if somebody is doing all of these things, bad things, how can you label people who've been living in Canada for such a long time as terrorists and a danger and whatnot? There have been incidents, especially the Quebec mosque, when a person entered a Quebec mosque and shot 6 people. The RCMP never killed that person. That person is being tried. He shot unarmed people. But every time there's a Muslim, you would shoot and kill that person. So I talked about this thing. Anyway, there was a lot of protests going on. There was obviously people showing solidarity with the people who got killed, especially the soldier who was guarding. I think he was just a regular guy. Regular guard. He wasn't even carrying like a loaded firearm or something like that, and he was shot. He was guarding some kind of a monument. October 27, 2014. There was mayor elections happening. I think Rob Ford was running for mayor at that time, and there were other people in Toronto. I finished my job. I was planning to buy a Ford. It was a Ford F-150. I did everything. All the paperwork was. I did everything. I did not submit the form. I was applying to buy a finance Ford F-150 truck. I remember. So my plan was that I would buy a truck, and then I would put like motorcycles in the back of the truck. I would just drive and then ride my motorcycles. Anyway, this is what I was doing. I finished my work. I went to the gym on Yonge Street, I think Good Life Fitness, and took the subway and a bus to come to my place where I was staying with my parents at 43 Thorntley Park Drive. As soon as I got in the lobby to get into the elevator, a bunch of people surrounded me, and a lady with like, I think, bangs, blonde hair. She came up to me and she asked, Akik? I said, yeah. And she showed me some badges. I'm with the Canada Border Services. You're under arrest. And another lady, like this tiny little, teeny tiny lady, she grabbed my hand, put it behind my back. And she said, oh, you're under arrest, and let go of the bag and whatnot. And she handcuffed me in front of everybody, the whole building, because it was the voting days. Everybody was watching me, and they said that you have been deemed inadmissible into Canada on grounds of security. You're a national threat to the security of Canada. And then they put me in a car. And then locked me. And then they took me to OPP detachment, I think. Near the airport, OPP or RCMP detachment. And remember when I told you in my previous videos, when I saw like Nissan Altimas following me, I showed you a video. I will also share a screenshot of that. They took me into the garage. It said Nissan Altima tires and whatnot. Anyway, I was up there. They got me fingerprinted. They took my photo and then put me in a room. And then in the room when I was placed, I was told that there was a guy, his name was Matthew Fox. He came up and he said, I'm with the CBSA, I think. And he said that you've been deemed you've been placed under arrest on grounds of security. You've been deemed a threat to national security of Canada. And these are the reasons why we have. And they gave me and he showed me a paper on which the warrant was there. They said there was a Canada-wide warrant for my arrest. Remember, my firearms issue happened in August 2012. They found me danger to the national security of Canada as I was walking a free person since then, on October 27, 2014, 2 years. A threat to national security of Canada was just walking around freely for 2 years, doing his job, paying his taxes, living his life. Anyway, and the reason was that they said that Muhammad Aqiq Ansari is deemed as a member, as an active participating member of Sipah-e Sahaba Pakistan or Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat, a proscribed terrorist organization. Now, before I leave you with this thing, because I'm going to talk about this in the next video, as I will have some documents with me. Sipah-e Sahaba Pakistan or Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat, I think they changed the name, has nothing to do with ISIS or what happened in Canada, I think a week or something prior. This was just an excuse to arrest me and deport me. And that is what he said. He said, well, they're going to deport you. And as I looked at this thing, at the details that I will show you in the screen, I said, well, this is nonsense. He said, well, good. Well, we would like to know more about it, whatever. Nonsense. I said, I'm going to talk to my lawyer and whatnot. And then he left. After he left, remember the bald guy with glasses on? That was Peter Simmons from the RCMP. I will share his badge number. He showed up. And you know what he did? I stood up. I said, well, it's good to see that, finally we met. He actually did not shake my hand. He said, sit down. I sat down. And he took out his badge, or whatever, his ID card, his RCMP ID card, and placed it in front of my eye like this. He said, I want you to look at this. Take a look at this, okay? I want you to read my name. What does that tell you? That would mean that I am the one who's doing all of this thing to you, Peter Simmons. Obviously, I was strip searched, and they gave me a food, which I later found out was just their technique of getting my DNA. So they took my DNA apparently with this trick, and they said that we're gonna deport you. So you're gonna be calling. If you want to call somebody, you went to Pakistan, so you have your passport in your possession. I said, yeah, sure. Well, it would really help if you could surrender your passport, your Pakistani passport. I said, well, it's at my home. And I said, well, I have to call my mother. And the lady who arrested me, this little teeny tiny lady who arrested me, came in barging and said that, so this teeny tiny lady, she came in barging and she said, well, either you tell him, either he speaks they talk in English, or they don't talk at all. Well, my mother doesn't speak English. She understands a little bit but doesn't talk. So I told him to call my brother, Sadiq. He was in Edmonton at that time, doing his job. And I called him. And this guy said that, well, I am such and such officer from, and your brother has been arrested. And the conversation is going to be in English only. So they gave the phone to me. And I spoke to him, brother. I said, well, brother, I have been arrested by them. And they said that they're going to deport me. And my brother is like, what do you mean deported? And then he started speaking Urdu, in Urdu again. He said, you know what? He said the whole family is going to be in tension again. The whole family is going to go through so much pain because of this, all of this thing. Why are they deporting you? I said, well, this is not the time. But, you know, that's what they're saying. And they said that you have to give them my passport and call it home and tell my mother to give my passport. I did not know, but I didn't. At that time, you know what? It's been like since 2000, since I was in Canada, about like a year or two in Canada. Every time I would try, I would go through some kind of a shit experience. 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I mean, how many years would I go through all of this shit? So at that time, I had already mentally given up as well. Because I said, okay, if they want to deport me, go ahead and deport me, whatever. I'm done with this thing. Because, look, every time I would save up some money, they would arrest me, the police would arrest me, pointlessly charge me for some reasons, one reason or the other. And then I'd be broke again. I started getting a job again. I started making some money. And then all of a sudden, something like this would happen. My brother had lost his job because of all of these issues that the police was causing for me. My niece was going through so much trouble because of all these things. The whole family gets disturbed. We are family-related people. They try to isolate me from my friends. They harass my friends. I said, well, it's okay. If they want to deport me, let them deport me. But the charges were bogus. I did not even know that if something like this would happen, if these were actual charges. I did not know. I thought this was a criminal case and they had to prove their case in a real court. So I thought that I could win, because in a real court, bogus allegations like these would not stand. So I was confident that I would win and that I would sue the police. But anyway, they said that they were going to take me to what's called a Millhurst, I think it's called Millhurst, something like that. Central East or something, some kind of a Millhurst prison. And they gave me some food and then took all my photos and whatnot, put me in the back of their vehicle, and then they would take me to a Millhurst prison, which apparently was a very dangerous police station. And the RCMP cop, one guy, not him, but he had a cap on him. He said, well, usually I go after robbers and bad people. What I can say is that you're not that kind of a person, but you know what, stay out of trouble. I said, well, your trouble has a way of finding me. That's what I told him. And I got out, went in there was a warden, and they used my previous history, and the warden obviously has an attitude. Bald guy. He said, oh, unsafe storage of firearm, that's a bad thing. I did not respond anyway. And they took me and locked me up in the prison. I was there for like 5 days. So let's end it at that. I will tell you what happened after that. But yeah, so that's my life. I was not planning on making any more videos on this thing. I had given up. I'm living in Pakistan. I've accepted that. But my life is these things, they keep bugging me, and my psyche keeps fighting these things. And the longer I hold this weight in my hand, the heavier it gets. So I have to tell all of these things to you guys now. So I'm going to continue making these videos in the future, and you're going to find out what else I've been going through. Till then, take care.